The winter of 1892 arrived in Hollow Creek like a curse whispered through frozen branches. By mid-November, the town had already disappeared beneath 3 feet of snow. The roads, if you could still call them that, were nothing more than white scars carved through the wilderness, impassable except on foot or by horse-drawn sleigh. The nearest settlement, Millwood, lay 18 miles east, but it might as well have been 100. When the blizzards came, Hollow Creek became an island. Silent. Isolated. Forgotten. The town itself was small. Barely 300 souls clinging to existence in the shadow of the Appalachian foothills. Most families survived on what they could hunt, trap, or preserve from the autumn harvest. The general store rationed flour and salt. The church held twice as many funerals as weddings. And the single schoolhouse, Hollow Creek School, stood at the center of it all like a crooked spine holding together a dying body. It was a 2-story structure, built from dark timber that had long since begun to rot at the edges. The paint had peeled away years ago, leaving exposed wood that turned black when wet. The windows were narrow, some cracked, others patched with cloth or tin. Inside, the air smelled of damp wool, coal smoke, and old paper. A single iron stove squatted in the corner of the main classroom, fed throughout the day by the older boys who took turns hauling wood from the shed out back. The schoolhouse had been built in 1867, just after the war, on land that the town elders purchased cheap from a widow who wanted nothing to do with it anymore. There were stories, of course. There always were. Some said the land had been a burial ground once, long before white settlers arrived. Others claimed it had been used during the war for things that shouldn't be spoken aloud. But people didn't talk about it much. In Hollow Creek, you learned early to keep certain things buried. Miss Eleanor Hartley had been teaching at the school for 6 years. She was 32 years old, though she looked older. Her face was angular and pale, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin at her temples. She wore the same dark wool dress almost every day, high-collared and severe, with a silver brooch pinned at her throat. A gift, she once said, from her late mother. Her voice was sharp, her discipline stricter. The children feared her more than they respected her. But in a town like Hollow Creek, fear was often the only thing that kept order. Eleanor lived alone in a small cabin at the edge of town, a 15-minute walk from the schoolhouse. She had no family, no suitors, no close friends. She attended church every Sunday, sitting in the same pew near the back, never speaking unless spoken to. Some of the women in town whispered that she was cold, unnatural. Others said she was simply broken, hollowed out by something that had happened years ago, something she refused to name. But Eleanor Hartley was good at her job. She kept the children quiet, kept them reading, kept them in line. And in the winter of 1892, that was all that mattered. There were 23 students enrolled that year. Most were between the ages of 6 and 14, farm children, trappers' sons, daughters of miners and loggers. They came to school bundled in layers of patched coats and wool scarves, their faces red from the cold, their boots caked in snow. They sat on long wooden benches, boys on one side, girls on the other, their breath visible in the frigid air until the stove finally warmed the room around mid-morning. Among them were Catherine and Abigail Whitmore. The Whitmore sisters were known throughout Hollow Creek, though not necessarily loved. Catherine, the elder, was 14 years old. She had pale blonde hair that fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and eyes so light they seemed almost colorless, like frost over glass. She was tall for her age, thin, with long fingers that moved gracefully when she wrote or sewed. She rarely smiled. She rarely spoke unless called upon. But when she did speak, her voice carried a strange weight, as if every word had been carefully chosen and measured. The other children found her unsettling. Some said she had a cruel streak, that she enjoyed watching others squirm under Miss Hartley's discipline, that she whispered things to the younger girls that gave them nightmares. Abigail, 11 years old, was softer in appearance but no less strange. She had the same pale hair, the same frost-colored eyes, but her face still held a trace of childish roundness. She was quieter than her sister, more withdrawn. She rarely looked anyone in the eye. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed downward, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her lips moving silently, as if reciting prayers or secrets only she could hear. The younger children avoided her. They said she smelled like old flowers, like something pressed between the pages of a Bible and left to rot. The sisters lived with their father, Silas Whitmore, in a large farmhouse 2 miles north of town. Their mother had died 3 years earlier under circumstances that were never fully explained. Some said it was fever. Others said she'd wandered into the woods during a storm and never came back. Silas himself was a hard man. Tall, gaunt, with deep-set eyes and a voice like gravel. He worked his land alone, rarely came to town, and even more rarely spoke to anyone. When he did, it was usually to trade for supplies or to collect his daughters from school in silence. People whispered about the Whitmores. They always had. December 9th, 1892. A Thursday. The morning began like any other. The children arrived in clusters, stamping snow from their boots in the narrow entryway, shedding coats and scarves onto hooks along the wall. The schoolhouse creaked and groaned under the weight of the cold. Outside, the sky was low and grey, heavy with the promise of more snow. Miss Hartley stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind her back, watching as the children settled into their seats. She had barely slept the night before. There had been sounds, strange sounds, coming from somewhere in the woods beyond her cabin. A rhythmic tapping, like metal on stone. Or footsteps. She couldn't be sure. She told herself it was nothing. Animals. Wind. But the unease lingered. Catherine and Abigail arrived late, as they often did. They entered without apology, their pale faces expressionless, their eyes scanning the room before they took their seats near the back. Catherine opened her slate and began writing immediately. Abigail simply stared at the wall. Miss Hartley cleared her throat. "Good morning, children." "Good morning, Miss Hartley," they replied in unison, their voices flat and mechanical. The day's lessons began: reading, arithmetic, penmanship. The stove hissed softly in the corner. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows in their frames. And then, just before noon, the first shot rang out. It was distant but unmistakable. A sharp crack that echoed across the frozen landscape, cutting through the murmur of voices and the scratch of chalk on slate. The room went silent. Miss Hartley's head snapped toward the window. "Stay seated," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her hands had begun to tremble. Another shot, closer this time. One of the younger boys whimpered. A girl near the front began to cry. Miss Hartley moved quickly to the window, pulling aside the thin curtain. Her breath caught. Through the snow, she could see a figure, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a long dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. He was walking slowly toward the schoolhouse, a rifle cradled in his arms. Behind him, the forest loomed like a wall of black teeth. "Lock down," Miss Hartley whispered. Then louder, "Lock down!" The children erupted into chaos. The word hit the children like a physical blow. Lock down. It was a protocol that had been drilled into them only 3 months earlier, after news arrived from Millwood about the massacre at Redstone Creek School. 7 children dead. The teacher shot through the door while trying to protect her students. The killer, a drifter with a grudge against the church, had walked into the school with 2 pistols and a hunting knife, and by the time the sheriff arrived, the floor was painted red. After that, school boards across the region implemented emergency procedures. Teachers were instructed on what to do if an armed intruder appeared. Doors were to be locked, windows barricaded, children hidden. And above all, silence. Miss Hartley had practiced it with the children twice, once in September, once in October. Both times the children giggled nervously, treating it like a game. But this was different. This was real. "Move!" Miss Hartley's voice cut through the rising panic like a blade. "Away from the windows, now!" The children scrambled from their seats, knocking over slates and inkwells in their haste. Some ran toward the back of the room. Others froze, paralyzed by fear. Little Samuel Kern, only 6 years old, stood in the center aisle, tears streaming down his face, his mouth open in a silent wail. Miss Hartley grabbed him by the arm and shoved him toward the others. "Move, Samuel, move!" Another shot rang out, this one so close it sounded like it had come from the schoolyard. One of the windows exploded inward, glass spraying across the floor in a glittering arc. The children screamed. Miss Hartley spun toward the door and threw the heavy iron bolt into place, locking it from the inside. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the bolt. She moved to the windows next, yanking down the heavy canvas shades that had been installed after Redstone Creek. They wouldn't stop a bullet, but they would at least obscure the view. "Desks!" she barked. "Push the desks against the windows, all of you!" The older boys, Jacob Finch, Thomas Grimwell, and Daniel Marsh, sprang into action, shoving the heavy wooden desks toward the windows, stacking them haphazardly to create makeshift barricades. The younger children huddled together near the back wall, some sobbing, others too shocked to make a sound. Catherine Whitmore moved calmly through the chaos, her pale face expressionless. She walked to the corner where her younger sister Abigail sat frozen on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, lips moving soundlessly. Catherine knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't speak. She simply waited, as if this were all perfectly normal. Miss Hartley's mind raced. She tried to remember the protocol. Lock the doors, barricade the windows, hide the children. Hide them where? The schoolhouse had only 2 rooms, the main classroom and a small storage closet near the back where they kept firewood, chalk, and cleaning supplies. It wasn't big enough to hide 23 children. But there was one other place, the basement. Her stomach twisted at the thought. The basement was accessed through a narrow trap door in the corner of the room, hidden beneath a threadbare rug. It was small, damp, and pitch black, more of a crawl space than a proper cellar. It had been used for storage years ago, but no one went down there anymore. The air was foul, the walls wept with moisture, and there were stories. During the war, people said the basement had been used to hide deserters, or prisoners, or worse. Miss Hartley had only been down there once, during her first year teaching, and she'd emerged with her skin crawling and a feeling that something down there was watching her, but she had no choice. "Older children," she shouted, "help me with the rug." Jacob, Daniel, and Thomas rushed over. Together they yanked the heavy rug aside, revealing the trapdoor beneath, a square of rotting wood held shut by a single rusted latch. Miss Hartley hesitated for only a moment before pulling it open. The smell that rose from below was immediate and overwhelming. Earth, rot, and something else. Something sweet and sickly, like flowers left too long in a closed room. The children recoiled. "I'm not going down there," whispered Mary Cullens, a thin girl of 12 with wide, terrified eyes. "You are," Miss Hartley said coldly. "All of you. Now." Another shot. This one struck the side of the building with a dull thud, splintering wood. The children needed no further convincing. One by one, they climbed down the narrow ladder into the darkness below. Miss Hartley handed down a single oil lamp, its flame flickering weakly. The smaller children went first, then the older ones. Catherine and Abigail Whitmore descended together, Catherine guiding her sister by the hand. As the last child disappeared into the basement, Miss Hartley counted heads. 23, all accounted for. "Stay quiet," she hissed down into the darkness. Not a sound. "Do you understand?" A chorus of whimpers and terrified whispers rose from below. "Do you understand?" she repeated, her voice sharp as a whip crack. "Yes, Miss Hartley," came the trembling reply. She lowered the trapdoor and dragged the rug back over it, smoothing it into place. Then she stood, her heart hammering in her chest, and turned toward the barricaded windows. Outside, the footsteps had stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Minutes passed. Or hours. time lost all meaning. Miss Hartley stood near the door, a fire poker clutched in her white-knuckled hands. She strained to hear anything. Footsteps, voices, breathing. But there was nothing. Only the howl of the wind and the creak of the old building settling under the weight of snow. She moved to one of the windows and peered through a gap in the barricade. The schoolyard was empty. No sign of the man. No tracks. Nothing. Had he left? Was he circling the building? Waiting? Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. She forced herself to think clearly. The town was less than a quarter-mile away. Someone must have heard the shots. Help would come. The sheriff. The men from the mill. Someone. But as she stared out at the snow-covered landscape, she realized with a cold, sinking certainty, no one was coming. Hollow Creek was too small, too slow, too afraid. She was alone. She and 23 children, locked inside a rotting schoolhouse with a gunman somewhere outside. And then she heard it. A sound from below. At first, she thought it was one of the children moving, but no, this was different. It was a scraping sound, metal on stone, slow, deliberate. She walked to the trapdoor and knelt beside it, pressing her ear against the wood. Scrape, scrape, scrape. "Children?" she whispered. "Is everything all right down there?" Silence. Then faintly, she heard Thomas Grimwell's voice, small, shaking, barely audible. "Miss Hartley, there's a door down here." Her blood ran cold. "What?" "There's a door, in the wall. It wasn't here before." Miss Hartley's hands began to tremble. "Thomas, listen to me. Do not open that door. Do you hear me? Do not—" A scream erupted from the basement, high-pitched, primal, cut short, then chaos. Children shrieking, scrambling, the crash of the oil lamp shattering, darkness swallowing sound. Miss Hartley tore the rug aside and flung open the trapdoor. "Children! Children!" The ladder shook as bodies surged upward in a blind panic, hands clawing, faces streaked with tears and dirt. One by one they hauled themselves out of the basement, gasping and sobbing. Miss Hartley grabbed them as they emerged, pulling them to safety, counting frantically. 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, 21. She froze. "Where are Catherine and Abigail?" The children stared at her, wide-eyed and mute with terror. "Where are the Whitmore sisters?" Little Samuel Kern pointed a trembling finger back toward the open trapdoor. "They went through the door," he whispered. "The door that wasn't there." Eleanor Hartley stood at the edge of the open trapdoor, staring down into absolute darkness. The oil lamp was gone, shattered somewhere in the chaos below. The only light came from the grey winter sky filtering weakly through the barricaded windows. It wasn't enough. The basement was a pool of ink, swallowing everything. "Catherine!" she called down into the void. "Abigail!" Nothing. Not even an echo. The 21 children who had escaped huddled together near the back wall of the classroom, wrapped in each other's arms, faces pale and streaked with dirt and tears. Some were still sobbing. Others stared blankly ahead, their minds retreating into shock. Miss Hartley's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears, a drumbeat of panic she couldn't afford to indulge. She forced herself to think, to act. "Jacob," she said sharply, turning to the oldest boy. "Do we have another lamp? Candles? Anything?" Jacob Finch, 14 years old, broad-shouldered from years of farm work, nodded quickly. "There's candles in the storage closet, Miss Hartley, and matches. Get them, now." He ran. Miss Hartley turned back to the trapdoor. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the opening to steady herself and leaned forward, straining to see anything in the blackness below. "Catherine? Abigail? If you can hear me, please answer." Silence. But not the silence of emptiness. It was heavy. Waiting. Jacob returned with 3 thick tallow candles and a small tin of matches. Miss Hartley took one, struck a match, and lit the wick. The flame sputtered, then caught, casting a weak circle of yellow light. "I'm going down," she said. "Miss Hartley," Jacob started, his voice cracking. "Stay here. Keep the others calm. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you take everyone and run to town. Do you understand?" Jacob swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." She didn't wait for further protest. She placed the candle between her teeth, gripped the ladder with both hands, and descended. The smell hit her immediately. It was worse than before, thick and cloying, like rotting flowers mixed with damp earth and something else, something metallic. Blood? No, not quite. But close. Her feet touched the dirt floor. She pulled the candle from her mouth and held it up, turning slowly. The basement was smaller than she remembered, barely 10 feet across, with a low ceiling of rough wooden beams. The walls were packed earth, shored up with old timber planks that had warped and cracked over time. Water seeped through in places, leaving dark stains that looked almost like oil in the candlelight. There were crates stacked along one wall, old supplies, forgotten tools, broken furniture. Dust and cobwebs covered everything. The air was cold enough that her breath misted in front of her face, but the Whitmore sisters were nowhere to be seen. "Catherine," she whispered. "Abigail." Her voice sounded flat, muffled, as if the walls themselves were swallowing the sound. She took a step forward, sweeping the candle left and right, searching for any sign of the girls, footprints in the dirt, a piece of torn fabric, anything. And then she saw it. On the far wall, half hidden behind a stack of old crates, a door. Miss Hartley froze. She had been in this basement before. She knew this space. There had been no door, just walls, dirt and timber and nothing else. But there it was. It was small, barely 5 feet tall, and made of dark, age-blackened wood. The surface was rough, splintered in places, and covered in deep gouges that looked like claw marks. There was no handle, no lock, just a door, standing alone in the wall, as if it had always been there. She felt her stomach twist. They went through the door that wasn't there. Samuel's words echoed in her mind. She stepped closer, holding the candle up. The light flickered across the surface of the door, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something moving beneath the wood, like shadows swimming just under the surface of dark water. She reached out, hand trembling, and pressed her palm against the wood. It was warm, not hot, but warm, like skin. She jerked her hand back. "Catherine?" she called again, louder this time. "Abigail? Are you in there?" No answer. She leaned closer, pressing her ear against the door. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, so faintly she almost thought she'd imagined it, she heard singing. A child's voice, high and clear, singing a melody she didn't recognize. Down in the dark where the roots run deep, where the blind things crawl and the lost souls weep, come, little ones, come and see what's waiting beneath the crooked tree. The voice stopped. Then another voice joined it, deeper, older, not quite human. Come down, don't be afraid. The door is open, the path is laid. Come down, don't delay, or we'll come up and take you anyway." Miss Hartley stumbled backward, nearly dropping the candle. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Her mind screamed at her to run, to get out of this basement, to seal the trap door and never look back. But the girls were still down here. She forced herself to move forward again. She gripped the edge of the door and pulled. It didn't budge. She pulled harder, bracing her foot against the wall. The wood groaned, but the door remained shut. "Open!" she hissed through clenched teeth. "Open!" And then, as if in response, the door clicked. It swung inward slowly, revealing not a room or a passage, but darkness. Absolute, impenetrable. A void so complete it seemed to pull at the light from her candle, bending it inward like water spiraling down a drain. Miss Hartley held the candle forward, trying to see what lay beyond. Nothing. Just black. and then something moved in the darkness. A pale shape, small, child-sized. "Abigail," Miss Hartley whispered. The shape came closer, slowly, too slowly, and then it stepped into the light. It was Abigail, but not quite. Her dress was torn and filthy, her hair hanging in limp tangles across her face. Her skin was gray, not pale but gray, like old meat. Her eyes were open, but they didn't focus on anything. They stared straight ahead, empty and glassy. Her lips moved. "Come down, Miss Hartley. Catherine wants to show you something." Her voice was flat, lifeless. Miss Hartley took a step back. "Abigail, sweetheart, we need to leave. Right now. Take my hand." Abigail didn't move. "She's waiting for you, down below, where the roots run deep. Abigail, please." And then, from somewhere deep in the darkness behind Abigail, came another voice, Catherine's voice. But wrong, so wrong. "Come down, Miss Hartley. Come see what we found." Miss Hartley turned and ran. She bolted for the ladder, candle clutched in one hand, her skirt tangling around her legs. She didn't look back. She didn't stop. She climbed the ladder faster than she'd ever moved in her life, her breath tearing out of her throat in ragged sobs. She burst through the trapdoor and onto the classroom floor, scrambling away on her hands and knees. "Close it!" she screamed. "Close it! Now!" Jacob and Daniel rushed forward and slammed the trapdoor shut. They dragged the rug back over it, then piled desks and chairs on top, weighing it down. Miss Hartley sat on the floor, gasping for air, her candle sputtering in her shaking hand. The children stared at her, wide-eyed and terrified. "Miss Hartley," Jacob whispered, Did you find them?" She looked up at him, her face pale as death. "No," she lied. Because she didn't know how to explain what she'd just seen. She didn't know how to tell them that Catherine and Abigail Whitmore were still down there, still singing, still waiting. Outside, the wind had died down. The gunshots had stopped. And when the men from town finally arrived an hour later, Sheriff Howard Brennan and 5 others armed with rifles and lanterns, they found no trace of an attacker, no footprints in the snow, no shell casings, nothing. But when they asked Miss Hartley what had happened, she could barely speak. All she could say over and over was, "The girls went through the door that wasn't supposed to be there." Sheriff Howard Brennan didn't believe in ghosts. He'd spent 30 years keeping order in towns like Hollow Creek, small, isolated places where superstition ran thicker than blood, and every unexplained noise became a demon, every shadow a harbinger of doom. He'd learned early on that most mysteries had mundane explanations: missing livestock, coyotes, strange sounds in the night, wind through old timber, vanished travelers, usually ran off with debts unpaid or lovers unmarried. But this was different. He stood in the schoolhouse classroom, hat in hand, looking at the barricaded windows, the overturned desks, the trap door buried beneath furniture. 6 men from town stood behind him, farmers, mill workers, men who'd dropped everything when word spread that there'd been gunfire at the school. Miss Eleanor Hartley sat on a bench near the cold stove, wrapped in a wool blanket someone had brought her. Her face was bone white, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't hold the cup of water they'd offered. The children had been taken home, carried through the snow by parents who'd arrived in a panic, demanding answers no one could give. But 2 children hadn't gone home. Catherine and Abigail Whitmore were still missing. Sheriff Brennan crouched down and pulled back the rug covering the trapdoor. He studied it for a long moment, then looked up at Miss Hartley. "You're sure they went down there?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "And you went down after them?" Another nod. "What did you see?" Miss Hartley's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. She closed her eyes, took a shaking breath, and tried again. "A door," she whispered. "A door. In the wall, on the far side. It wasn't there before. I've been in that basement dozens of times, Sheriff. There was no door." Brennan exchanged glances with Marcus Webb, a grizzled logger who'd helped build half the structures in Hollow Creek. Marcus shook his head slightly. "No door in that basement, Howard," Marcus said quietly. "I helped shore up those walls myself back in '71. Nothing down there but dirt and timber." "I know what I saw," Miss Hartley said, her voice rising. "The children saw it too. Thomas Grimwell said—" "Thomas Grimwell is 8 years old," interrupted Reverend Silas Cook, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a perpetually disapproving expression. "Children see all manner of things in the dark, Miss Hartley, especially when they're frightened." "I saw it," she insisted, her eyes flashing. "And I saw Abigail. She came through the door. She spoke to me. Her voice broke. She wasn't right. Something was wrong with her. The men shifted uncomfortably. Sheriff Brennan held up a hand. "All right, let's take this slow. I'm going down there myself. Marcus, bring a lantern." "Howard, I don't think—" Marcus started. "I didn't ask what you think. Bring the lantern." Marcus nodded reluctantly and fetched a storm lantern from near the door. He lit it, adjusted the wick until the flame burned steady, then handed it to the sheriff. Brennan moved the furniture aside, opened the trap door, and descended into the basement. The smell struck him immediately, rot and flowers and something else he couldn't name. His boots hit the dirt floor with a soft thud. He raised the lantern high, sweeping it across the space. The basement was exactly as Marcus had described. Small, cramped, walls of packed earth and old timber, crates and debris scattered about. Nothing unusual, and no door. Brennan walked the perimeter slowly, running his hand along the walls. Solid earth, no gaps, no openings. He checked behind the crates, kicked aside old boards, even pressed against the timber supports to see if anything shifted. Nothing. He stood in the center of the space, frowning. Miss Hartley had seemed so certain, but there was no door, no sign that there had ever been a door. He was about to call up to the others when he noticed something. Footprints, small ones, child-sized, pressed into the dirt floor near the far wall. He crouched down, holding the lantern close. The prints were fresh, clear enough that he could make out the pattern of the shoe soles. They led from the ladder to the wall, and then stopped. Right where Miss Hartley said the door had been, but there was nothing there now. Just wall. Brennan reached out and pressed his palm against the earth. It was warm. He jerked his hand back, staring at the spot. Then slowly, he pressed his palm against the dirt again. The warmth was unmistakable. Not hot, but distinctly warmer than the surrounding wall. He stood and climbed back up the ladder. "Well?" Reverend Cook asked as Brennan emerged. "No door," Brennan said flatly. "But there are footprints, 2 sets, leading to the far wall and stopping." "Stopping where?" Marcus asked. "Against solid earth." The room fell silent. "That's impossible," the Reverend said finally. "I know." Miss Hartley looked up at the sheriff, her eyes hollow. "Do you believe me now?" Brennan didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Marcus. "You said you helped build this schoolhouse?" "Helped shore up the foundation," Marcus corrected. "Building was already standing when I got involved." "What was here before? Before the school?" Marcus scratched his jaw. "Nothing, as far as I know. Just land. Widow Calloway owned it. Sold it cheap to the town after her husband died." "Why'd she sell it cheap?" Marcus hesitated. "Didn't want it anymore, I suppose." "That's not an answer, Marcus." The logger sighed. "Look, there were stories, old stories, about the land, but that's all they were, stories. Tell me." Marcus glanced at the Reverend, who was frowning deeply, then back at Brennan. "Some of the older folks said the land used to be a meeting place, before white settlers came, native tribes. They said rituals were held here, burials maybe, other things." "What kind of other things?" "I don't know, Howard. I don't put stock in that kind of talk." Sheriff Brennan turned to the Reverend. "What about during the war? Was this place used for anything?" Reverend Cook's jaw tightened. I wouldn't know. I didn't arrive in Hollow Creek until 1878. But you've heard things. The Reverend said nothing. Reverend. Cook exhaled sharply. There were rumors. During the war, Confederate sympathizers used certain locations as holding areas for deserters, Union prisoners, sometimes civilians who asked too many questions. I don't know if this land was one of those places, and even if it was, that has nothing to do with what's happening now. Maybe it does, Brennan said quietly. He walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered schoolyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky a dull orange-gray. Shadows stretched long across the ground. We need to search the woods, he said. If the girls got out somehow, through a root cellar, a tunnel, anything, they could be out there, lost, freezing. In this cold? Marcus shook his head. They wouldn't last the night. Then we'd better find them before dark. They organized a search party within the hour. 12 men, armed with rifles and lanterns, fanned out from the schoolhouse into the surrounding forest. They called the girls names, fired signal shots, searched every hollow and thicket within a mile radius. They found nothing. No tracks, no torn fabric, no blood. No sign that Catherine and Abigail Whitmore had ever left the schoolhouse. By nightfall, the search was called off. The temperature had dropped to well below freezing, and the wind had picked up again, cutting through coats and scarves like knives. The men returned to town, exhausted and empty-handed. Sheriff Brennan went to the Whitmore farmhouse alone. Silas Whitmore opened the door before Brennan could knock. He stood in the doorway, tall and gaunt, his face carved from stone. His eyes, those pale, unsettling eyes his daughters had inherited, fixed on the sheriff without blinking. "They're not coming home, are they?" Silas said. It wasn't a question. "We're still looking," Brennan said. "But I need to ask you some questions." Silas didn't move. "Ask." "When did you last see your daughters?" "This morning, when they left for school." "Did they seem different? Upset? Afraid?" "No." "Did they mention anything unusual? Anything strange happening at the school?" "No." Brennan shifted his weight. "Mr. Whitmore, I need you to understand how serious this is. Your daughters have disappeared under highly unusual circumstances. Anything you can tell me, anything at all, might help us find them." Silas stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stepped aside. "Come in." The inside of the Whitmore house was cold. Colder, somehow, than it should have been even without a fire. The main room was sparse and shadowed, lit only by a single oil lamp on a table near the center. There were no decorations, no photographs, no warmth. Silas gestured to a chair. Brennan sat. "You want to know about my daughters?" Silas said, settling into a chair across from him. "What they were. What they are." "What do you mean, what they were?" Silas folded his hands in his lap. His voice was calm, steady, utterly devoid of emotion. "Catherine and Abigail were not like other children. You must have noticed. The way people look at them. The way other children avoid them." "I've heard talk," Brennan admitted. "But that's all it is. Talk." "No," Silas said. "It's not." He leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, Brennan saw something flicker in those pale eyes. Not grief, not fear, certainty. "Their mother," Silas continued, "was not from Hollow Creek. She came from further east, from a town called Ashwood Hollow. Do you know it?" Brennan shook his head. "Most don't. It burned 20 years ago. Every building, every person. Nothing left but ash and bones. What does that have to do with—" "My wife survived," Silas interrupted. "She was the only one. She wandered out of the ruins carrying something. Something she said she'd found beneath the church. She never told me what it was. But after that—" He paused. "She was different. Changed." Brennan felt a chill crawl down his spine. Changed how? She dreamed things, saw things, heard voices that weren't there, and when the girls were born, he trailed off, staring at his hands. They were born wrong, Sheriff. Not deformed, but wrong. Empty. Like something was missing, or something else had been put inside. Mr. Whitmore, you asked me what I know, Silas said, his voice hardening. This is what I know. My daughters are not lost. They're not hiding. They went where they were always meant to go. Brennan stood abruptly. If you know something, if you have any idea where they are, they're below, Silas said simply. Where the roots run deep, where the door opens, where it waits. Where what waits? Silas smiled. It was a terrible smile. Empty. Hollow. You'll find out soon enough, Sheriff. And then he stood, walked to the door, and opened it. You should leave now, before dark. Brennan rode back to town with his heart pounding and his mind racing. He didn't know what to believe anymore. But as he passed the schoolhouse, dark and silent against the snow, he saw something that made him pull his horse to a stop. Light. A faint, flickering light coming from inside, from the basement window. He dismounted slowly, drew his revolver, and approached. As he got closer, he heard it, singing. 2 voices, high and sweet and utterly inhuman. Come down, don't be afraid. The door is open, the path is laid. Sheriff Howard Brennan stood in the snow, staring at that light, listening to that song. And for the first time in 30 years, he was afraid. Sheriff Howard Brennan stood in the snow outside the schoolhouse, his breath clouding in the frozen air, his revolver heavy in his hand. The singing continued, faint, rhythmic, wrong. Come down, the dark is wide, come see what waits on the other side. He should leave, ride back to town, gather more men. Come back in daylight with torches and axes and enough firepower to face whatever nightmare had taken root in this place. But he knew with absolute certainty, that if he left now, if he waited until morning, whatever remained of Catherine and Abigail Whitmore would be gone forever, if it wasn't already too late. He tied his horse to the fence post, checked his revolver, 6 rounds, all accounted for, and walked to the schoolhouse door. It was unlocked. The hinges creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the classroom was dark except for the pale moonlight filtering through the barricaded windows. Desks stood like crooked tombstones. The stove was cold. The air smelled of chalk dust and something else, something sweet and rotting. The trapdoor was open. The furniture that had been piled on top of it had been moved, shoved aside carefully, deliberately, as if by many small hands. The rug lay crumpled nearby. And from the opening in the floor, that flickering light pulsed upward like a heartbeat. Brennan approached slowly, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. He stood at the edge and looked down. The ladder descended into warm, orange-gold light. Not the harsh white glow of a lantern, but something softer, organic, like firelight filtered through amber. And the singing was louder now. 2 voices, perfectly synchronized, rising and falling in a language he didn't recognize. Or maybe it was English, but so distorted, so wrong, that his mind refused to process it. Catherine, he called down. Abigail? The singing stopped. Silence. Then, from the darkness below, a small voice, Abigail's voice, clear and innocent. Sheriff Brennan, is that you? His heart clenched. Yes, sweetheart, it's me. Are you hurt? No, we're fine. We're just waiting. Waiting for what? For you. A chill crawled up his spine. I'm coming down. Stay where you are. He holstered his revolver, gripped the ladder, and descended. The warmth hit him immediately. The basement shouldn't have been warm. It was December. The ground was frozen solid, but the air down here was thick and humid, almost tropical, carrying that cloying scent of flowers and decay. His boots touched the dirt floor. He turned slowly, taking in the space. The walls were different. Before, they'd been packed earth and timber. Now they seemed to pulse, the dirt rippling slightly, as if something beneath it was breathing. The wooden support beams were darker, slick with moisture, and covered in something that looked like moss or mold, but moved when he wasn't looking directly at it. And there, on the far wall, exactly where Miss Hartley had said it would be, the door. It was open now, not wide, but enough to see through. Beyond it was not a room or a tunnel, but a space, vast and impossibly deep, stretching down and down into shadow. The walls of this space were not earth, but something else. Something that glistened wetly in the amber light, like the inside of a throat. And standing just inside the doorway, holding hands, were Catherine and Abigail Whitmore. They looked the same, almost. Same pale hair, same colorless eyes, same dark dresses. But their skin had a grayish tint now, like ash. Their eyes didn't blink, and when they smiled, both at the same time in perfect unison, their teeth seemed too sharp. "Hello, Sheriff," Catherine said, her voice flat and sweet. "We've been waiting for you." Brennan's hand moved to his revolver. "Girls, I need you to come with me, right now." "Why?" Abigail tilted her head. "We like it here. It's not safe." "It's safer than up there," Catherine said, gesturing vaguely toward the ceiling. "Up there, people hurt each other. They lie. They steal. They kill." Her smile widened. "Down here, everyone tells the truth." "What are you talking about?" "Come and see," Abigail whispered. "Come down and see what's waiting." "I'm not going anywhere," Brennan said firmly, "and neither are you. Your father is worried. The whole town is looking for you." At the mention of their father, something flickered across Catherine's face. Not emotion, exactly. More like a glitch, a momentary disruption in a mask. "Father knows," she said quietly. "He's always known." "Known what?" "What we are. What it made us." Brennan took a step forward. "What is it? What's down there?" The girls looked at each other, then back at him. "The hollow," they said in unison. "The what?" "The hollow," Catherine repeated. "The empty place. The hungry place. It's been here longer than the town, longer than the trees. It was here before people had names for things." "And it wants to come up," Abigail added, her voice almost gleeful. "It's been waiting so long, but it needs permission." "Permission for what?" "To open." Brennan felt his pulse quicken. "Open what?" The girls smiled again, that terrible synchronized smile. "The door, all the way, so it can come through." Behind them, deep in the throat-like passage, something moved. It was too dark to see clearly, but Brennan caught a glimpse of something massive, something that unfolded like wings or roots or both, something with too many limbs and not enough shape. And then he heard it, a sound like grinding stone, like splintering bone, like 1,000 voices whispering the same word over and over in a language that predated human speech. His hand flew to his revolver. "Get away from that door, now!" "You don't understand," Catherine said, stepping closer. "We're not prisoners, Sheriff. We're chosen. Mother found the key. She opened the first door, and when we were born, we carried it inside us. The hollow has been waiting for us." "Waiting for us to come home." "This isn't your home." "It's more home than that house ever was," Abigail said, and for the first time, there was real emotion in her voice. Anger. That cold, empty house, with a father who looked at us like we were broken, like we were wrong. "You're not wrong," Brennan said, surprising himself with the softness in his voice. "You're just children, and someone, something, has been lying to you." Catherine's expression hardened. "You don't know anything." "Then tell me. Help me understand." For a moment, just a moment, he thought he saw something human flicker in Catherine's eyes. a shadow of the girl she might have been if the world had been kinder, if her mother hadn't carried something dark out of the ruins of Ashwood Hollow, if the hollow hadn't marked her before she was even born. But then the moment passed. "It's too late, Sheriff," Catherine said quietly. "The door is open, and it's going to stay open, one way or another." "What does that mean?" "It means," Abigail said, "that the hollow is hungry, and it's going to feed." Behind the girls, the darkness surged. Something massive pressed forward, filling the doorway, pushing the girls aside like dolls. Brennan caught a glimpse of it, just a glimpse, and his mind recoiled. It was wrong. Not in the way a wolf or a bear was dangerous, but in the way a nightmare was dangerous. It had no fixed shape. One moment it looked like a tangle of roots. The next, like a spider made of human hands. Then like something that shouldn't exist. Angles that hurt to look at, surfaces that bent light in impossible ways. And at its center, if it even had a center, was a mouth. Not a mouth with teeth, but a mouth like a wound. A jagged tear in reality itself, opening and closing slowly, hungrily, lined with something that looked like eyes. It spoke. Not with a voice, but directly into Brennan's mind, the words slamming into his skull like nails. "Give us the children!" Brennan raised his revolver and fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet struck the thing squarely in what might have been its head, or torso, or limb. It was impossible to tell. The thing screamed. Not a scream of pain, but a scream of rage, a sound so vast and terrible that it felt like the world itself was tearing apart. The basement walls shook, dirt rained from the ceiling, the door slammed shut with a sound like thunder. And then, silence. Brennan stood there, breathing hard, his ears ringing, smoke curling from the barrel of his revolver. The girls were gone. The door was closed, and on the far wall, burned into the wood like a brand, were 5 words in a child's handwriting. "We're sorry. It's too late." Sheriff Brennan climbed out of the basement, sealed the trap door, and nailed it shut with every piece of wood he could find. Then he burned the schoolhouse to the ground. He told the town it was an accident, a lantern tipped over during the search. No one questioned him. No one wanted to. The Whitmore girls were declared missing, presumed dead from exposure. Silas Whitmore disappeared 3 days later. Some said he walked into the forest and never came back. Others said he went down into the ruins of the schoolhouse and was never seen again. The land was abandoned, forbidden. Within a year, the forest had reclaimed it entirely. But even now, decades later, people in Hollow Creek refuse to go near that spot. Because on certain nights, when the moon is dark and the wind is still, you can still hear it. Singing. 2 voices, high and sweet and impossibly far away. Come down, don't be afraid. The door is open, the path is laid. And if you're foolish enough to listen, if you follow that sound into the woods, to the place where the schoolhouse once stood, you'll find something waiting. A trapdoor. Buried under roots and snow and a century of rot, still warm, still open, still hungry. Hollow Creek, West Virginia, present day. Dr. Sarah Mitchell parked her rental car at the edge of what used to be Main Street. The town was a corpse now, had been for decades. Most of the buildings had collapsed inward, their roofs caved in, their windows empty sockets staring at nothing. Vines and saplings grew through the floorboards. Rust consumed everything metal. The forest had been patient, and now it was reclaiming what had always been its. Only 300 souls had lived here once. By 1920, there were less than 50. By 1950, the town had been officially abandoned. The railroad had bypassed it. The coal mines dried up. And there were the stories, whispers that drove families away in the dead of night, never to return. Sarah was a folklore historian, specializing in Appalachian ghost stories and urban legends. She'd spent 5 years researching disappearances in isolated mountain communities, and Hollow Creek had always been on her list. But it wasn't until she'd discovered a cache of old county records in a forgotten archive that she'd found the name she'd been looking for. The Whitmore sisters, Catherine and Abigail. Vanished December 9th, 1892, during what the records vaguely described as an incident of violence at the schoolhouse. No bodies recovered, no suspects apprehended. Case closed within a week. But Sarah had found something else in those records, something that made her blood run cold. A list of children who had gone missing in Hollow Creek between 1892 and 1952. 43 names, all of them students at Hollow Creek School. All of them vanished without a trace. And all of them, every single one, disappeared in December. On the 9th, Sarah pulled her jacket tighter and stepped out of the car. The air was cold, but not unbearably so. December in the mountains always carried a bite, but today felt different. The cold was deeper, like it was coming from the ground itself. She checked her phone. No signal. Of course not. She'd lost service 20 miles back. She pulled out her camera, a digital recorder, and a flashlight, then locked the car and started walking. According to the old maps she'd studied, the schoolhouse had been located at the northern edge of town, near the forest line. The building had burned in 1892, another detail the records glossed over, but the foundation should still be there. She walked through the ruins, her boots crunching on broken glass and rotted wood. The silence was oppressive. No birds, no wind. Just her breathing and the sound of her footsteps. And then she saw it. The foundation. Barely visible beneath a century of overgrowth, but unmistakable. A rectangular outline of blackened stone, half buried in moss and fallen leaves. The remains of the schoolhouse. Sarah approached slowly, her heart beating faster. She could feel it. Something was wrong here. The air felt thicker near the foundation, heavier, like invisible hands pressing against her chest. The temperature dropped sharply. Her breath misted in front of her face despite the fact that it had been nearly 50 degrees when she'd arrived. She knelt at the edge of the foundation and brushed away the leaves and debris. There, a trap door, or what was left of one. The wood was charred and rotted, but the iron hinges were still intact. And beneath it, she could see darkness, a space, the basement. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled out her flashlight and shone it through the gaps in the wood. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dirt walls, roots, and a door. Sarah froze. There, at the far end of the collapsed basement, partially buried in earth and debris, was a door. Small, blackened, covered in strange markings that looked like claw marks or writing in a language she didn't recognize. She should leave. She knew that. Every instinct screamed at her to get back in her car and drive away, but she'd come too far. She pulled out her camera and started taking photos. Then she activated her voice recorder. December 9th, 2024. I'm at the site of the old Hollow Creek schoolhouse. I've found what appears to be a basement access point, and there's a door. I don't know what it leads to, but the markings on it are consistent with symbology I've seen in accounts of ritualistic sites in... She stopped. Something was moving in the darkness below. She aimed her flashlight down again, her breath catching. For a moment she saw nothing, just shadows and dirt. And then eyes, dozens of them, small, pale, watching her. Sarah stumbled backward, dropping her flashlight. It clattered on the stone and rolled, the beam spinning wildly before settling on the trapdoor. The eyes were gone, but she could still feel them, watching, waiting. She grabbed her flashlight and ran. Sarah didn't stop running until she reached her car. She threw herself inside, locked the doors, and fumbled for her keys with shaking hands. The engine roared to life. She threw the car into reverse and peeled out, tires kicking up gravel and dirt. She didn't look back. She drove for an hour before she finally stopped at a gas station near the highway. Her hands were still trembling. Her heart was still pounding. She pulled out her camera and scrolled through the photos she'd taken. Most were blurry, useless, but one was clear. The door. And on the door, clearly visible in the high-resolution image, were words carved into the wood. Words she hadn't seen when she was there. Words that shouldn't have been visible in the dim light. But they were there now, burned into the image like they'd been waiting for her. "Come down. We're still waiting." Sarah deleted the photo immediately. Then she deleted the rest. Then she drove home and never spoke of Hollow Creek again. Hollow Creek, West Virginia. 3 weeks later, a family from Ohio, young couple, 2 kids, got lost on a back road and decided to explore the abandoned town they'd stumbled across. The parents thought it would be an adventure, something to tell friends about. The kids, Emma, age 11, and Michael, age 8, thought it was creepy but exciting. They wandered through the ruins, taking selfies, laughing at how overgrown everything was. And then Emma found the foundation. "Mom! Dad! Come look at this!" The parents followed her to the edge of the old schoolhouse site. "What is it, sweetie?" "There's a door, down there. Can we go look?" The father peered into the darkness. "I don't think that's safe, honey. It's pretty unstable." "Please?" Emma begged. "Just for a second?" The father sighed. "All right, but just a quick look, and stay close to me." He climbed down carefully, his daughter following. The mother stayed above with Michael, watching nervously. Emma's father shone his phone's flashlight around the basement. "Not much to see, Em. Just dirt and—" He stopped. "What is it?" Emma asked. He was staring at the door, the small blackened door at the far end. "That's weird," he muttered. "Why would there be a door down here? Can we open it?" "I don't think—" But Emma was already moving toward it, curiosity overriding caution. "Emma, wait." She reached out and touched the door. It was warm. "Dad, it's—" The door swung open, not with a creak or a groan, but silently, smoothly, as if it had been opened 1,000 times before. Beyond it was not a room, but darkness, vast and endless, and from that darkness came a sound, singing. Come down, don't be afraid. The door is open, the path is laid. Come down, don't delay." "Emma, get away from there," her father shouted. But Emma wasn't listening. She was staring into the darkness, transfixed. And then, slowly, she stepped forward. "Emma, no!" He lunged for her, grabbing her arm, but she was already through. One moment she was there, the next she was gone. Swallowed by the darkness, the father screamed. He tried to follow, tried to reach through the doorway, but something pushed him back, hard. He flew backward, slamming into the dirt wall. The door slammed shut with a sound like thunder, and when he scrambled to his feet, gasping and sobbing, the door was gone. Just wall. Solid earth, as if it had never been there at all. Above ground, 3 minutes later, the mother was frantic. "Where's Emma? Where's my daughter?" The father couldn't speak. He just stared at his hands, shaking. "Where is she?" He looked up at his wife, his eyes hollow and broken. "She's gone," he whispered. She went through the door." "What door?" "There's no door down there. You're not making sense." He couldn't explain it. Couldn't make her understand. Because even he didn't understand. By the time the police arrived, the family's story had fallen apart. The father insisted Emma had disappeared into a door that wasn't there. The mother insisted there had been no door. Michael, traumatized and crying, said he'd heard singing. The police searched the basement. They found nothing. No door, no passage, no sign that Emma had ever been there. She was declared a missing person, presumed lost in the woods, but the father knew. She hadn't gotten lost. She'd been taken. Hollow Creek, the hollow nose, deep beneath the ruins of the schoolhouse, in a place that exists between spaces, in the dark where roots tangle and reality bends, Catherine and Abigail Whitmore sit together, holding hands. They haven't aged. They never will. Around them, in the shadows, are others. 43 children from Hollow Creek. Emma, the newest arrival. And countless others stretching back centuries. Children from towns that no longer exist. Pulled through doors that shouldn't be there. They sing together, their voices echoing through the hollow. Come down, don't be afraid. The door is open, the path is laid. And somewhere above, in the world of light and life and forgetting, another December 9th approaches. Another town, another school, another door waiting to open. Because the hollow is patient, the hollow is hungry, and the hollow never stops calling. The end. The gunman who approached Hollow Creek School on December 9th, 1892 was never found. Because he was never real. The hollow doesn't need guns or men to do its work. It needs fear. It whispered to Miss Hartley the night before, planting dreams of violence. It created the sounds of gunshots, the shadow of a man in the snow. It orchestrated the lockdown, the panic, the hiding. Because the hollow needed the children in the basement. It needed them close to the door, and it got what it wanted. Catherine and Abigail were always meant to open the door. They'd been marked since birth, carriers of the key their mother found in the ruins of Ashwood Hollow. But the hollow is greedy. It wanted more than two. It wanted them all. And it almost succeeded. 23 children entered that basement. Only 21 came out. Sheriff Brennan stopped it, for a time. By burning the school, by sealing the door, by keeping the secret buried. But doors like that can't be destroyed. They can only be closed. And eventually, inevitably, they open again. The hollow waits. The hollow calls. And somewhere, right now in a small town you've never heard of, a child is standing at the edge of darkness, listening to a song that shouldn't exist. Come down, don't be afraid. Will they listen? Will you? End of 1892. Lockdown school.